It is allergy season here, so I'm like,
I know.
ever since we got back.
I'm like worse in my throat. Like, okay, so real quick, last night I was like trying to go to sleep and I would swallow, but it felt like I didn't swallow. So I was like constantly like swallowing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to go to sleep because I'm just like swallowing like this. So I'm gonna be up all night.
And then do you ever get like almost paralyzed where you can't swallow anymore? Like, how do you swallow?
And it's like, okay.
How does this work?
And sometimes like the swallow gets like stuck halfway and you're like, is this how I die? I can't breathe. This is how I die. This is the dumbest way to die.
Death by swallowing.
Quick, get some pants on.
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Erin Green.
I am Michael Gray.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you believe the last time we saw each other, it was in person?
In person, I know. That was what, a week and a half ago?
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah, which was really nice. Yeah, Erin, I was up in Boise to spend the weekend with some friends, and Erin lives in Boise, and so on Saturday morning, I think. Friday? I don't know. One of those days.
I think it was Friday I came and visited you.
Yeah, for 30, 45 minutes. And we got to sit on the porch and have a drink and chit chat. And it was really nice. It's the first time in like eight years.
I know.
We see each other in person.
It's so crazy.
We have this whole business together and we never see each other in person.
Well, it's always fun to visit with you, every week. But then last week I was on vacation and so we didn't record. And so I was thinking about like, I feel like I haven't seen Michael for a while, but then it was an odd feeling because I was like, well, I just actually really for real saw him. Gave him a hug like a week and a half ago. So there's this,
Yeah. But
I miss you, buddy.
I know. Same way. I was like, oh, we get to record. It feels like it's been several weeks to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that way to you, but it feels like it's been 2 or 3 weeks. I just
that's a good thing.
That's all.
Well, it's much better than you being like, oh my God, already?
Right.
We're talking again?
God, that week and a half went by fast.
Jeez.
Gotta put up with
Here
Erin.
We are again. That voice. I know.
So how was vacation?
It was there were some really good parts. It was not the like full on give it a 10 kind of vacation that we had hoped we would have.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was, out of our control when it comes to weather and circumstances. But we planned a mountain bike trip to Utah, and we have never been around the St. George and Hurricane area exploring the mountain bike trails. And so we had done a little bit of research asking people around, and we have a camper top for our pickup that I think I had mentioned we haven't really broken in before. So we've got, Matt's got the setup, pretty well dialed. There were a lot of really great things about how we were set up to just camp wherever we could, wherever there's dispersed camping. But we did have some crazy wind one day. And I shouldn't say one day because it really came in, it came in the afternoon, and I had been checking the weather app. I'm full on like the Farmer's Almanac when I'm traveling or planning anything. I'm like, okay, what's happening with the weather? Right. And I had seen that there was this really significant cold front coming in on Monday. And so I had told Matt, like, I think Monday night's going to be windy, but then it looks like it subsides and kind of moves on. So on Monday, we had camped at this area called Hurricane Bluffs, and it's like this mesa that kind of sits outside of town, and it does sit up above this canyon rim. And so you are sort of perched out there in the middle of nowhere. I shouldn't say in the middle of nowhere, but probably in an unprotected area when it comes to weather systems. You're sort of on the front of, getting hit with wind or rain or adverse weather. And I had been looking at the forecast and I was like, okay, we're going to get wind tonight. And we're sitting there. It had picked up throughout the day. We're sitting there eating dinner and it's quite windy. The type of wind where you're having to like purposely set heavy things on anything that might blow away or blow over. And we're watching up the valley where the freeway is, and you can see just this kind of brown cloud working its way down the valley. And
Mm.
Matt's like, "What's that over there?" It's like all of a sudden you kind of feel like you're in a sci-fi movie, like there's something amiss coming.
Like
And
the
we're
never ending
watching it,
story when the nothing is
right?
coming. It's like
Yeah,
that.
something
Here
like
it
that. Yeah,
goes.
exactly. We're kind of watching it, and we're watching it move down the valley, and it looks like it's going to miss our location, but we're like, I think that's a dust storm.
Mm.
And we finished dinner, we're kind of cleaning up and putting some stuff in the pickup, and we look over and it looks like it's coming, like literally coming our way, and you can feel the wind kind of picking up, and we're like, shit, we
Mm.
gotta get stuff in the pickup. So we kind of pack up as best we can, and we just like arrange things in the back of the pickup. We have a Chevy Colorado. It's not like a huge pickup, but we like arrange things so we can sit in there on a couple boxes and just
Mhm.
like chit chat with our beverages and kind of watch the wind. And so we decide to go to bed as soon as the sun goes down, because that's kind of what you do when you're camping. And
Mhm.
and the weather was crazy, so we couldn't sit outside. We woke up in the middle of the night to the pickup literally swaying, like there was a football team like pushing the side of it. Like it was just like swaying, and our camper
Whoa.
is up top, right? So we're perched up there,
Yeah.
and the camper was the wind gusts would come through so violently that the clamshell kind of top. So it's a go fast camper, which for those of you listening is it sort of opens like a wedge. So like one end is taller than the others, and then
Mhm.
it folds back down, and then that soft tent on the sides. So the gusts would come through, and it would create a suction that would basically bring the clamshell, like the hard clamshell top, down several inches, like it was going to slam on you. And so
Ugh.
we're laying there just like watching this happen. And there's hydraulics on the side, and it's a pretty robust design. And so we were both just like, there's no way it's going to close on us. But after about the fourth or fifth time that it happened, Matt was like, screw this. We are getting out of this thing. This is not safe, blah, blah, blah. And so it was a mad dash to like gather up all our stuff, get into the cab of the pickup. Matt's out there closing down the camper in this like wind and dust storm at midnight. And we get
Jeez.
into the cab of the pickup, and we're just like kind of sitting there stunned. Like, what do we do? Because you can hear, I mean, the wind was so violent. The forecast had said 40-mile-per-hour plus gusts. I'm sure it got over 60. I'm
Yeah.
positive. I mean, I've been in some crazy wind before, but not while camping
Right.
in that, dramatic of a scene. And so then it lasted. I kept watching the forecast, and it was supposed to last all through Tuesday and then into Tuesday night. And we're like, there is no way in hell we are spending another night out
No
here.
kidding. Jeez.
So it was, I mean, it was scary just being in the camper when that was happening, even though, part of you is like, the chances of something really bad happening is probably pretty slim. Like we can
Mhm.
drive somewhere, we could go to a hotel, but at the same time, you're kind of like, but what if, it like
Yeah.
tears off our camper or whatever. And so we ended up packing up and driving to Page, Arizona, which is a couple, I don't know, 2.5 hours away, and found a gem of an urban mountain bike trail. It's like 10
Yeah.
mile trail that goes around the town with beautiful views of Lake Powell. And it was pretty calm, hardly any wind. And it was just a beautiful little detour that we took that
Nice.
again, cost us time driving and some
Sure.
planning and logistics and different things, but kind of saved the day for that couple days in there. And then we had a number of other comical mishaps along the way that I won't bore everybody with, like a broken stove, and Matt's bike was malfunctioning. And anyway, it
Yeah.
was an adventure, and
An
we learned a lot
adventure.
about patience with each other, and communication, and positive attitude, all those life lessons.
Just finding those little
The,
silver linings,
yeah,
aren't you?
you keep learning.
Yep. So I think the moral of the story is for anyone listening or watching, don't go camping with Erin or I because we both had crazy windstorm experiences. Yeah.
Welcome to Oz if you're
Yeah.
camping with us.
Yeah. Just don't.
But we actually did have some really great bike riding and beautiful views. I mean, Utah is just such a unique area with the rock formations and canyons and the desert colors. And we had a lot of good laughs, and overall it was good, which is why we'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10. But yeah, it wasn't like the, perfect vacation we had envisioned.
Yeah, sure.
It was a middleish vacation.
So right where you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
Not great,
See?
not terrible. That's what you want in a vacation. Just
I know.
Oh, well, you're home safe. That's good.
I'm here. Here we are.
And here we are, back at it. Yeah, that's good to be back doing this.
So I think that our episode on kids in the kitchen was pretty popular. I got some comments, and
people seem to like it.
I think people liked the different approach that, we haven't talked a lot about kids and nutrition, but we're both highly qualified to do so. And so I think a lot of our listeners were really interested in that.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk a little more about kids.
Talking about kids.
And I think this episode, I'm going to put in that preemptive kind of disclaimer that if you don't have kids, don't tune out just yet, because the stuff we're talking about, I think, can really help you understand your relationship with food, your how your upbringing maybe has shaped some of your views on food, and we'll also provide some tips for adults as we go through our topic today. How you can learn to expand your own views and tastes and different thoughts about food.
Yep. Same kind of concept as the kids in the kitchen episode, just that, I mean, we all eat the way we eat because that's the way we were raised to eat. You know what I mean? Like, we know what we know, that kind of stuff. And in everything, but especially in our relationship with food, how we were raised and what meal times look like as kids and what verbiage was used around, treats and meals and too much, too little, that kind of stuff. It all shapes the way we eat. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients, we identify something as an issue because, well, that's just the way it was when I was a kid. And so for 18 plus years, this was just ingrained, like one example, quick sidetrack is like, you got to clean your plate, right?
Yes.
Well, man, we grew up in the generation where you eat everything on your plate. You're not going to waste anything because there are starving kids in Africa who would love to have, you know what I mean? That whole thing.
Right.
And so there's a lot of guilt, like if people don't clean their plates. So understanding that kind of stuff, which I think there'll be a lot of that for us as we kind of dive into how we talk to kids about food and how we design meal times, and that kind of stuff can really help us unpack some things that maybe we struggle with or have difficulty with.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I have those similar conversations with clients who I had one conversation just this morning, actually, around weight and eating and guilt and that whole spiral, where my client was hearing her mother say these things about her own body and her own eating habits. And she's telling me, my client's like, it's no wonder I think this way. It is no wonder. And that's not the first time that they've had that kind of epiphany. Once they're sort of tuned into being curious about how they have come to develop these food beliefs and beliefs about their body and beliefs about eating and certain rules, it's no wonder that it's there. And then it's super hard to work through these things and dismantle some of those beliefs that have been ingrained in you your entire childhood. Yeah. So this episode, we're going to talk about, I can't remember if I put the title in there, but something about avoiding food fights with kids. And so I get questions about picky eating and how do I know how do I know my kid is getting enough, or my kid wants to eat all the time? What do I do with that? How do I help my kid eat vegetables? All of those things I just mentioned are things that we run into as adults too. We have food preferences. A lot of my clients I talk to would really rather eat certain foods over others, and vegetables are kind of looked at as something you have to do or a punishment. they don't know how much to eat. And so they're asking me, like, how much do I need? What portion control should I follow? All
Mm-hmm.
of these things are developed as you're a child brought up in the
Yep.
food world. So we're going to go through some of this stuff. And I really want to focus on the division of responsibility, which is a concept. I think I mentioned it in the Kids in the Kitchen
Yeah,
episode.
I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. It was coined by Ellyn Satter, and I will include her link in the show notes for you all because she has some really great resources. But she's like the godmother of feeding children and child feeding and has done tons of research. And the division of responsibility is very simply put, the parent has a feeding job and the child has an eating job. So if the parents do their jobs with feeding, the child will do his or her job with eating. And we'll go through what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah. And so I think another disclaimer before we dive in. So I think as if you're listening to this, from the perspective of a parent, I think like with most things we talk about, like enter this with a lot of grace for yourself, because it's easy to talk about things in anything, but sort of like ideal situations, right? And things may often not go like we want them to, or like we think they should, or like, so just go into this understanding that there's some wonderful, fantastic guidelines here, I think, way to structure things and that kind of stuff. But if it doesn't go like it should all the time, that's okay. Like that's part of this, right? Is being flexible and understanding that, sometimes you got to pick your battles a little bit. And sometimes you got to go with, hey, is it better? Because better is better. And that's good. Is it perfect? Who cares? Is it better? Are things going better? Are meal times better? Are my kids more open to food long term? That kind of thing. And also being open to the fact that, like, if we're going to, like, if we need multiple exposures to embrace things, our kids do too, maybe even more. So, like, just try this. Don't stress out. Like, some things may work great, some things maybe don't jive with you, and that's okay. Just go into this really open and just seeing what there is for you that can really kind of help design your kids' eating habits to be healthy and open and flexible and designed with exploration in mind, and but also just relax. It's going to be okay. Things don't go
You're
super
still
well
a
at
good
first.
parent.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
we all just try and do our best. And
Mhm.
that's a good point, because that was definitely a place where I would operate from when I was working with parents, is to assume that parents have the best intentions for their kids.
Mhm.
So it's really hard for parents to receive a message that somehow they're failing or doing
Right.
something wrong by their child.
Right.
So I invite you to, as you listen to this, just think of small steps or small changes that maybe sound interesting to you and that you want to try. Don't try and overhaul everything at once. And similarly, if you're an adult without kids listening to this, think about how your upbringing in these areas might shape how you approach food now, and the
Right.
things you tell yourself about food. And
Yeah.
maybe get curious about those and work on some stuff yourself. So the division of responsibility, I am just going to briefly go through Ellyn Satter's definition of the division of responsibility. So basically, the parent is responsible for the what, when, and where of the eating. Okay. So the parent, I always tell parents, you get to be the menu planner.
Mhm.
You get to decide what is offered. That is not the child's job. That is your job. So that's usually the first misstep that I see parents make, is they will ask their kid, what do you want to eat? What will you eat? Oh man, that is a recipe for disaster. So the parent decides what, the parent decides when, and I should say adult, because there's a lot of different family dynamics out there. The adult decides when the eating happens, logically speaking, you as the adult have a much more reasonable concept of time than a child does.
Mhm.
Children thrive on structure, and they are very good at adapting to schedules and structure when it's presented to them and they kind of know what to expect, right?
And done
So,
consistently. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, and this again, there's different levels of the division of responsibility with infants, with children, with teenagers, and I'm focusing mainly on the child group. So this would be like from age 2, all the way up through school age years, because that'll be kind of the largest
Mhm.
demographic, and that's the one that most of us remember. That's where most of our eating habits and
Yeah.
structure is formed.
Developed. Yeah.
So the what, when, and where. And then the where of feeding would be, are we all sitting at a table? What's the environment like? Are we going to be sitting in front of the TV? Are we eating in the car? So as the adult, you again are the one that sets that stage and
Mhm.
decides those things.
Yeah.
Um, and part of this, I mean, just to get into a little more detail, choosing and preparing the food, providing regular meals and snacks, um, making eating times pleasant. Man, this is a big one. And I think often overlooked, because how many families kind of dread mealtime? I've had a
Right.
lot of families be like, oh man, I just dread dinner
Right.
because my kid is not interested in eating. It's a huge fight.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to come to the table. Everybody complains about the food. Mom or dad can't sit down and eat their meal because they're always up and wrangling
Mhm.
kids or getting extra things. And so I think that's another really important um, message to send to parents and to you adults. If you don't have kids, mealtime should be pleasant.
Mhm.
Really do your best to create a pleasant environment there.
Right. And I think part of doing that is, I mean, I really think that it's important that you don't have like electronics or stuff at the table, put your phones away, put tablets away, turn the TV off. I mean, there's a time and a place, I think, for, pizza and movie and that kind of stuff. But for the regular eating experience, I think one, be consistent with expectations. You know, electronics are off. I think this is a great time to engage as a family because you're just sitting there staring at each other, talk, joke, laugh. I mean, for us, meal times, I think are one of my favorite times of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get lunch together because, we're Lia's at school and I'm often working, through lunches and eating a little bit later and that kind of stuff. But we sit down and eat breakfast together before school, and on the weekends, and we have dinner together, and it's it's just fun. We laugh and we joke and we talk about our days and we ask questions, and we really make it a really rich experience. And it's one of the few times throughout the day where all four of us are together without something else going on, because
Yeah.
kids are playing outside, or we're doing chores or mowing the lawn, whatever. And so it's these really, I think, just like gold times to come together as a family, shut all distractions off, and eat. Yeah, but just really, man, we really get to spend some really good quality time together. And I think if you can, this takes work too. Don't try it once and go, oh, it didn't work. Like, we've got to be consistent with this stuff so kids kind of grab a hold of, what are the expectations here? Oh, and this is happening consistently. Okay, I need to adapt. But I try to make it a really rich, enjoyable experience, because it really can be. And I think a lot of families don't sit down and eat together anymore. It's everybody kind
No.
of does their own thing, or there's food in the kitchen, eat it when you want, kind of thing. But so just having sort of those expectations, as we're going to engage together, um, and then expectations of just like manners and habits. This is how we're going to talk. We are not going to be up, over and over. We're not gonna, whatever. It's unique to everyone. But having expectations and being consistent with those expectations can really turn a mealtime into I think, a really special time together as a family that happens on a regular
Absolutely.
basis.
Yeah, it's a meaning in the mundane kind
Mm-hmm.
of situation.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, and we grew up when we were little kids, we had family dinners almost every night. I mean, my dad was a farmer, and so there were seasonal, considerations there where maybe
Mm-hmm.
he would be out working late or something. but we had a lot of family dinners. And as we got older, and my brothers and I were in high school and we're involved in sports and different activities and whatever, we just didn't have those
Yeah.
family dinners anymore. And we would, if we did eat together, a lot of times it was like in front of the TV, or,
Yeah.
somewhere along the line that kind of just fell apart. And then, I get into college, and a few years into college, I moved in with my cousins that, I should say my dad's cousins. So they're my dad's age, and they have, children my generation.
Mhm.
So I'm basically living with an aunt and uncle, kind of family
Yeah.
situation, and like some grandparents, and this mixed blended family. And they would have family meals around the dinner table 3, 4 nights a week. I mean, just depending on everybody's schedule and how things were going. And I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it. And I'm 25 years old, and I'm just like, I've been missing this. Like, this is so
Yeah.
wonderful. And so it's something Matt and I are definitely good at. I mean, breakfast can be hit and miss if we have different schedules, but dinner time is generally together,
Mhm.
on some level, just the two of us, and, chit chat and connect. So I think that's a really important one for families. And even just thinking, if you could picture mealtime being more pleasant for your family, or if you could kind of describe what you would like meal times to be like, tell me about that.
Right.
That was a really common question when parents seemed exasperated. Like, meal times often are a chore. It's like one more thing you have to do and in the day, multiple times a
Mhm.
day. And it's a pain in
Mhm.
the ass because they're just like, it's not pleasant. I don't look forward to it. I'm not enjoying it. I don't
It
know what to
just
make.
keeps
My kid
coming.
won't eat it. It won't end. And if
Yeah.
I could paint a picture, or have them paint me a picture, what might meal times look like? All of a sudden it opens up this door to,
Mhm.
well, let's investigate some options of how that can be.
Yeah.
And I would invite anybody to think about that. How could you make meal times a little more pleasant for yourself, now that you're an adult?
Yeah. I agree. And I think there's also a real responsibility on the parents too. And this may seem like a well duck kind of thing, but you kind of set the tone, and
Totally.
I think it's easy, and I've been there before too as a parent, to turn mealtime into close your mouth, don't, can you pick up the mess you just made? Sit back down, get your, just like, where it's just like kind of criticism, and it's just like, no one's having fun. This is just like hey, let's sit here for 15 minutes and let me point out everything you're doing wrong. I think there's ways to convey those messages that aren't so critical, but also just letting kids, like, I think as a parent, it's easy to want to be like, okay, here's the change, now do it, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, let's let kids adapt and kind of work their way into doing things differently,
Mhm.
and really recognize when kids do things well, like, hey, thanks, I see you spilled, that whatever. Thanks for picking it up and putting it back on your plate. I appreciate that. Be less to clean up
Mhm.
after dinner. Thanks for, whatever. So there's a lot of responsibility on parents' part to make mealtime not a very unfun experience, which it can
Yeah. Yeah.
easily be, I think.
Definitely. And your point of, you mentioned before, like kind of modeling
Hmm.
eating behaviors,
Hmm.
manners, conversation. Um, you know, Ellyn Satter's model acknowledges that responsibility of the parents, little by
Hmm.
little, you model what meal times
Yeah.
are going to be like for your family. You model eating behaviors. So if there is a parent at the table that will not eat a certain food, or talks badly about the food, that
Hmm.
child is going to learn that.
Right.
If there's a parent at the table that uses their napkin and utensils and cleans up, and is very mindful about that and courteous, will you please pass me this thing or whatever,
Right.
kids will learn that.
Hmm.
So to dovetail into yours, be patient with your child and understand they're learning. Every meal time is a learning opportunity for them.
Hmm.
It's your job as a parent to model those skills and behaviors and that
Right.
conversation so that your child will eventually learn it. And children need autonomy at different different levels at different stages. honor that piece too, because learning to scoop something onto their plate or learning to pour something into a glass or
Yeah.
learning to pass something without dropping it. I mean, these are all things that are just like part of the experience. So we all had to learn it.
Kids have this innate ability to like carry a plate or a bowl like at like 45 or greater degrees, where it's just like I'm gonna carry it, so just any second everything's gonna slide off.
And as the adult, you're like on the edge of your seat, like I just want to.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Let me help you with that. Let me
Yeah,
help you.
let's try and get that a little more level. Maybe use two hands on that one. So I don't have mac and
Yes.
cheese in my lap. Yeah.
Yes. So this next one, I think, is a really important point. Just going through Ellyn Satter's, more detailed division of responsibility aspects. She says, be considerate of your child's lack of food experience without catering to likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that is a heavy one because, again, it goes back to the whole, what will you eat?
Right.
What do you want to eat? That's probably the worst thing you can ask your child, even near a mealtime, because then, I mean, you're the one that has to like prepare that. And you've set that expectation that that child can basically just short order cook their way through life. I love that it's phrased, be considerate of your child's lack of food experience. So using terms like, oh, you may not be ready for that flavor yet. Or maybe you just, maybe that's not your favorite way to eat that food. Maybe we'll try a different way next time. Talking about food in a familiar light so you can say, oh, this vegetable is really close to, we're having sweet potatoes tonight, which kind of tastes like carrots a little bit, but they're like a potato and a carrot kind of mixed. And you like both of those foods. So you might like this, talking about things so that you help build that familiarity, but without actually short order cooking to cater to your child's preferences. Because what will happen? Your child's food world will grow very, very slowly because there's no incentive for them to try new foods. And they're very likely to just stick to a very small select, group of foods. And if this persists over the years, I think any parent who's gone through this will attest that, man, it is hard then once they get into those older and teenage years where they are making a lot of their own food decisions. Man, it is so hard to try and convince your kid to try new foods and to expand their diet, even though they might be coming, more interested in eating different foods and expanding variety for whatever reason. Right. I work with a lot of teenage athletes on that, where, we'll talk about why it's important to eat certain foods and why we need to expand that. And they're super reluctant to do so because they just never went through that experience as a child.
Yeah. And I think too, as part of being considerate about that, their lack of experience is being okay with them not wanting to eat it at that point. And we talked about this kids in the kitchen, like kids need to be just like we need to be exposed to things sometimes often before they're like, okay, I'm kind of, a little more comfortable grabbing hold of this, or maybe I actually do kind of like that. So I think it's always important for kids to try it, like let's give it a shot. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it because I don't like everything. That's a ridiculous thing to expect that your kid is going to, one, like everything, and two, like everything the first time they try it. So just being kind about like understanding, like, listen, this is a wide world for them to explore, and that can be daunting at times, I think, and kind of overwhelming. And it's a process. Like I think it's easy to put a lot of importance and weight on like a meal or trying a food. And it's like, I think as a parent, it's really important to step back and go like, okay, we've got years to do this. It's not like, oh, we tried sweet potatoes once and they didn't like it. Crap. Sweet potatoes are out. It's like, revisit it, be patient, be kind, let them explore, let them experiment, let them experience things. and lean into, trying some new stuff. Because honestly, I mean, there are things that I hated as a kid that I love now as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. And there are things, like my 9-year-old, like 3 months ago, she loved, and now she's like, yeah, I just don't really dig them. And tastes change. Sometimes we have stuff too much and we need a break from it, or sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
haven't had enough and we just need to have it more so just be patient. Really, part of that being considerate is just understanding this is a process, a
Mm-hmm.
really a lifelong process, and so there's no need to put a ton of importance on this one tasting or this one meal. Understand that yeah, that you can come back to it and let kids explore a little bit.
Yeah. I'll ask parents too, what are you afraid might happen if your child doesn't eat this meal? Okay. So let's say you prepared a meal and your kid is refusing to eat. Well, number one, we know that children don't starve themselves. I mean, in very rare cases where there is a, neurological disorder or something at work, then sure, there's always exceptions. But on the whole, children don't starve themselves. They will eat,
Yeah.
and they'll eat when they're ready. So, what is your fear if your child doesn't eat at this meal? And the parents kind of look at me like I'm from Mars, like, why? What do you mean? What's my fear? My kid needs to eat. And I'm like, but your kid does need to eat, and they are eating. Like, they'll tell me all these foods that their child is eating and all the opportunities their child has to eat. Remember, as the parent, you get to pick the when. So
Mm-hmm.
you can have 6 eating opportunities in a day. Your kid isn't going to starve.
Mm-hmm.
You're not denying them food. That's the
Right.
other thing, is parents think if I'm not giving my child something that they'll eat, then I'm a bad parent because I'm not denying them. I'm not providing them with food. Well, of
Right.
course you're providing them with food, and it's perfectly edible food, and it's delicious food to you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as a parent, do your tastes and preferences just suddenly not matter anymore at meal
Right.
times? I mean, that's another thing, is showing children.
You're not making food you hate. Yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes, and Ellyn Satter says in one of her books, food doesn't always have to be your favorite. It doesn't always have to be your favorite. And as an adult who is a competent eater, I think you get that. You
Mm-hmm.
know that sometimes you eat foods because, I mean, sure, they might taste okay, but it's not your favorite. Teaching children that they don't always get their favorite, or they don't always get their first choice, and sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't with meals and snacks. That's an important life lesson too,
Right. Yeah.
beyond just the mealtime.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I'll tell you what my fear is as a parent. Like especially like with Sophie, if she doesn't eat much at dinner, my fear is I know that 15 minutes after she's been in bed,
Sure.
we're gonna have I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And it's gonna be just a whole ordeal. So
Yes.
that's my fear.
It's a
which,
valid fear
which
and
again,
common.
yeah, is not the end of the world, right? Like, and uh, I think being honest with myself and being honest as parents, it's like, man, that happens to us too. Sometimes at dinner time, we're just not super hungry. And then maybe an hour and a half later, like, oh, now I am,
Yeah.
I'm getting ready for bed and now I'm starving, or, like it happens. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we can make as parents is one, forgetting what it's like to be a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and two, the two biggest mistakes, I guess, two is like having different expectations for our kids than we have for ourselves,
Yeah.
and not allowing them to go through natural experiences or, course of events or whatever that we totally allow ourselves to go through, because the truth is that sometimes we make breakfast. I'm like, man, I don't want to feel like eating. I'm not hungry. But if my kid's not hungry, it's like, you better eat that food. You could just, and it's just, we kind of set ourselves up for, I think, kind of some issues in that way because we don't allow kids to be people,
Right.
and it's just kind of do what you're told and do it when you're told to do it. And we remove all of their preferences and personal experiences, which
Mm-hmm.
I think are important piece of learning how to be a competent eater. Like, oh, you aren't hungry? Okay, that's okay. If you aren't
Yep.
hungry, you don't have to stuff yourself. Like, ooh,
Yep.
that's setting us ourselves for trouble.
That's a really hard one
Mhm.
for parents to get around, is that that pressure to eat at the mealtime or the snack time. And
Mhm.
this is one, so we'll get into this a little bit more, because the next couple points that is made with Ellyn Satter's division of responsibility is not to let your child have food or beverages between set meal and snack times, except for water. That's the one exception. And to let your child grow into the body that's right for him or her or them. So, not letting your child have anything to eat or drink between meals and snack times. Again, this is something that parents feel like it's wrong. Like, my child comes to me and asks if they can have a banana. A banana is healthy. Why would I deny them a banana? Well, because it's very likely that with a child's small tummy and small appetite and their ability to be satisfied with just a small amount of food, that this is going to then have a domino effect for the rest of the day. Children would really prefer to snack if given the option, like snack, 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 graze all day. But let's look at the kinds of foods that are often offered for snacks. I mean,
Mhm.
sure, we have fruits and cheeses and yogurt and maybe some crackers and different things, but you don't get a lot of protein and vegetable and entree type, more kind of
Mhm.
complex and robust kinds of foods and flavors going on. Those are tending to be mealtime foods. So if we allow children to just snack and graze all day, and if the child comes and requests a snack from you, they're overstepping their responsibility into yours, right? Because as the parent, you are the one that chooses what, when, and where. If the child comes to you and says, I want a banana, you have to make that decision, like, well, in the context of our day, is it close to snack time or lunchtime? It's totally okay for you to say, we'll have a banana at snack time. How does that sound? That's going to be in about a half hour, or we'll have snack and a little bit later, just so you're regulating a little bit the timeline here, so that children come to the table prepared to
Right.
eat
Yeah.
with their appetite in the right place.
Yeah.
Because like you're describing, if Sophie doesn't eat dinner, what happens? She goes to bed and she's not super hungry until she's been laying in bed a little while and and
Mhm.
has time to register and think about it.
And no
So
distractions. And then she can really cue in with her body. It's
totally.
like, oh, there's a feeling there that maybe I didn't notice
Yep.
before because I was playing or watching or taking a bath or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So I think this is a tricky one for parents to navigate, and you have to make the decision that's best for you in
Mhm.
each of those scenarios, because everyone is going to look a little different. One of the things that Ellyn Satter recommends is have a food at the mealtime that is a familiar and uh, a likable food for the child. So whether that's bread or fruit salad or mashed potatoes or some of those very common, um, reasonably, bland or simple foods that kids tend to like, and serve it with, these other options that you've made for dinner. That way,
Mhm.
I mean, it creates a safe environment so your child knows there's something here that I know and like and is
Right.
familiar to me, so I can satisfy my hunger with that.
Mhm.
If they only eat fruit for dinner, I mean, is that ideal? Probably not, but is it going to hurt them for one
Yeah. Is it
meal?
terrible?
No.
Oh no, my kid got vitamins and nutrients. Oh man. And
Right?
fiber, man.
And it's funny, one of my friends, I don't know if she listens to the podcast, but her little, oh gosh, I think her little daughter is 4 or 5 now.
Mhm.
And so she shares on Instagram her plate, and it's so funny. It's always Gloria's plate, hashtag Gloria's plate. And
Mhm.
she's very funny. Like, she has a really cheeky way of explaining how Gloria navigated this meal and basically circumvented everything on her plate to just take a
Mhm.
bite or two of one of whatever is there.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing is, one of my professors in college added to this division of responsibility that it's the child's job. So the child decides how much and whether they eat. They also decide how they eat. So
Mhm.
if they want to dip their, I don't know, carrot sticks in like their milk or something and try that, let them try it. If
Yep.
they want to just kind of like draw circles in their food and kind of get to know it with their hands, that's reasonable. You get to decide when we're done playing with food if you're not going to
Mhm.
eat it. But it is okay for them to test things out and kind of eat how they want. If they want to eat with their fingers instead of using the utensil or vice
Yeah.
versa. So that's the other part with kids at the table is helping to build a familiar and kind of safe and welcoming environment, both from the conversation and the behavior of all the people at the table, but also from the food that's presented.
Right. Yeah. And going back to your mealtime snack point, I think something we get to do as parents when we say, "Hey, it's not quite time," right? Is we get to instill in them, and this is bigger than just eating, but it's definitely part of eating. Is it's okay to delay that gratification, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
can wait a little bit for the thing we want, and also to teach us like hunger isn't an emergency; it's a cue. It's your body communicating to you, but it's not like it's a sensation. It's like I have to make it stop now. It's
Yeah.
it's okay to experience that for a little bit and to kind of get a little comfortable with that discomforting feeling and know that this is what it means, this is what it communicates to me. It's time to eat soon, right? Like not as soon as I feel it, like, oh, I got to make it go away, but it's letting you know, hey, we're getting around that time. And it's okay to wait a little bit until it's the appropriate time to do that. And I think those are really important things for kids or people to learn to be really competent in intuitive, mindful eaters. And so sticking to those schedule, which I'll be honest, we do really well and we don't really well, and we do really well and we don't really well. You know, yeah, but which I think parents can relate. But you know what? Like I think we do it more than we don't, and we get more consistent. And that's okay. It's just like when we're working with ourselves, right? Like things fall off track, hey, you just get back on track. But
Right.
you really get to instill some really important skills and awareness in your kids when you stick to a structure.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you brought up the whole, um, feeling hunger is not an emergency. And this is a conversation I've been having a lot lately is the fear of hunger.
Mhm.
So somewhat related to what you're saying, but almost from an opposite, instead of like, oh my gosh, I feel hungry, I need to eat stat. Some people get so afraid of feeling that hunger that they'll overeat or they'll continually snack
Mhm.
or they're kind of preempting that hunger feeling. And I had a conversation with a client that was like, man, getting hungry feels like they're fearful of it because this person thought it was the wrong thing to do when you're trying to lose weight is to eat, right? Like eating is the antithesis of weight loss.
Yeah.
So getting hungry leads to eating. So getting hungry created a fear response for this person. And it was a really powerful conversation because we got into this again. How were you brought up to believe,
Mhm.
around food and hunger and appetite and how much should you eat? And this goes into the next point of let your child grow into the body that is right for them. Man, how many times have parents, I worked with growth grids when I worked at WIC, and parents would ask me, so where should he be right now? Like what's the perfect weight for him right now? Or how should she be growing? How do I get her to gain weight? How do I get her to lose weight? And I'm looking at this beautiful growth grid that's following a trajectory. I don't care if it's at the 90th percentile. I don't care if it's at the fifth percentile.
Yeah.
If it's tracking and if everything I'm hearing from you is in place for building a competent eater, I
Right.
am not going to tell you that your child needs to look differently or weigh differently or be shaped differently.
Yeah.
And this goes kind of into what we were just talking about, that whole appetite thing, because how many times have children been taught to disregard their appetite one way or the other because we're trying to change what their body is
Right.
supposed to look like. Eat
Right.
more, keep pushing the food, clean your plate, eat more,
Mm-hmm.
you need more, you haven't eaten enough, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Or stop eating, slow down. You're already, you don't need that much, those kinds of comments. They can be
Yeah.
very, very harmful. And they shape you as an adult. And I have proof of it working with adults
Yeah.
that have these memories and have become aware of how they've, built that belief system around food and their bodies and appetite.
Right. Well, and I think it's really important to remember with kids, like kids are growing, like
Mm-hmm.
literally, like their bodies are always changing. And because they're not going to be, a foot tall when they're an adult, and so they have a lot of growth and development, to do. And so their demands change often, and we've seen that over and over and over with our girls. There will be periods of time where it's just like, holy cow, like they're eating 3 times as much as they were a week ago or 2 weeks
Right.
ago, and it's just like it's almost just like they can't get quite enough, or they get enough and then they eat like as much as I do, and an hour later like I'm hungry. And because oftentimes I don't know if this is accurate, if you know this, I don't know this, but from observation of my girls, it really seems like they go through these periods where appetite and metabolism will really increase. They'll kind of eat in a way where they put on some weight and
Yep.
then they grow
Yep.
and then like lean out
Totally.
like crazy.
Yeah. I've seen
And
it on growth grids.
yeah,
It's a thing. Like you can
okay.
predict it. Yeah.
Well, I knew it was with our girls. I don't know if it was like a really a thing across
Yeah,
the board.
totally.
But so if they're going to put on some weight in preparation for growth, and then they're actually growing and getting, becoming leaner as they grow, and this constant cycle, like their demands are going to change constantly. And I think about how my appetite can vary from day to day or season to season or whatever, and I'm not growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm done. But so for a kid, how much more so are we going to have to adapt and flex, And I think it's really important to have this structure, but I also think it's important to hold that structure kind of loosely because they're constantly growing,
Yep.
like every 3 months, every 6 months, your kid's going to be different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bones are going to be bigger. I mean, just there's all kinds of stuff. And so we really have to be flexible with it too. And that's part of why it's so important to develop kids to be these competent eaters, is because their demands are constantly changing. And if it's this rigid structure of this amount or only this many times a day and that kind of stuff, man, we're setting ourselves
Right.
up for a real fight, because it has to constantly change because their needs are constantly changing.
Yeah. What you're trying to do is build trust within your child.
Mm-hmm.
Show your child that
Yes.
you trust them
Yep.
to make those decisions eventually and to learn this stuff. And then teach your child that they can trust themselves, that they know what their tummy is telling them,
Mm-hmm.
that they, you know, um, know how to prepare for a meal, that they kind of know the expectation of
Mm-hmm.
a meal. One of the other things I see, again, back to the sort of modeling behaviors, is emotional eating, stress eating, celebrating with food. There's this very common practice of placing certain foods on a pedestal. Children learn from a very young age, if you finish your vegetables, you get ice cream for dessert.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that do? It tells you that ice cream is a more desirable food than the vegetables. And so we have these messages sent to us from a very young age. Plus, we're observing our parents or even older siblings and their eating habits and how food, you know, interacts in our social world and for celebrations, for emotional responses, and that kind of thing. We've said this before. It's totally okay to answer emotions with food.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very natural human response. Teach your child how to answer those emotions in other ways as well.
Yeah.
And teach your child, you know, some understanding of food neutrality, and that food isn't always the answer for a celebration, for a hard day, for,
Right.
you got hurt and skinned your knee, let's go get you a popsicle kind of thing. Like, let's find some other
Mm-hmm.
answers to some of those emotions and some of those social gatherings, because that's another thing that I see
Yeah.
with families. And to your point, that is one of the things that I'll see on a growth grid, the deviation from the normal curve. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
start kind of probing with the parent, like, well, tell me a little bit about your child's eating habits. And if I hear some of those behaviors, like entertaining with food, curing boredom with food, grazing all the time, eating highly palatable snacks a lot in the day, sweet drinks. Kids are very susceptible to really enjoying sweet beverages, whether it's juice or soda or
Because they're amazing.
sports drinks, anything. Yeah, because I mean they taste
They're
good,
delicious.
and kids are programmed to like sweet things. So there are certain behaviors that can cause growth deviation. So I'm not
Sure.
saying that like all children just grow predictably and in a way that is appropriate for them. We any of us, I think even as adults, can acknowledge that there are certain environmental things and social things and food availability factors that can definitely alter how you eat and
Right.
influence that. So your
Yeah.
job as the parent is to try and set that environment up and those
Absolutely.
behaviors as best you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. And too, I mean, we talk about this a lot. Like, if things go wrong, not all the time, but oftentimes that's an opportunity to go like, okay, what can I learn from this? What could I have done differently? And so if things go wrong, like with your kids, it's not the end of the world. Two examples. So like there's been a few times where Lila doesn't really she has a neighborhood friend that she plays with outside sometimes before school, and only if there's time, right? So there's been times where it's like, oh, I'm just going to eat real quick or not eat as much as I need to and
Right.
just go play. And later on it's like, wow, I was starving before lunch. Oh, really? Huh, okay. Why do you think that might be? you know, Maybe because you didn't eat as much as your body needed. And that's a good lesson to go, okay, maybe I need to make sure that I get enough food that I'm not like starving for hours and have this really uncomfortable, like, oh my God, I'm so hungry feeling while you're trying to study and focus. Okay, lesson learned, right? Lesson learned a bunch of
Yep.
times. Or also just this last weekend. So Sunday was Easter, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got Easter candy and jelly beans and chocolates and stuff, and we just kind of let our kids do what they wanted to do. And about 11:30 at night on Sunday night, I hear Lila upstairs, and I hear her like walking to the bathroom and then back, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And so I kind of called up there. I was like, "Hey, baby, okay?" Like she's been asleep for a couple hours already. She's like, "I don't feel very good. I think
Oh
I'm going to throw up."
no. Oh
So I go
no.
upstairs and I was like, "Oh, like, do you think you're sick?" She's like, "No, it's not sick." We're just kind of talking about things. I was like, "Do you think maybe like it's you had too much candy and it's upsetting your tummy?" She's like, "Yeah, I ate way too much candy."
Oh no.
And okay, is that fun? No, but it's a lesson, right? Like for
Mm-hmm.
her to go like, okay, next time I'll probably pull it back a little bit because this sucks. I just
Yeah.
got too much sweets in me and my stomach feels upset and I feel like I'm going to throw up. I don't feel very good. And lesson learned, and it's probably a lesson she'll have to learn again, right?
Right. Well,
But like we have to do the same things too. We have to learn these lessons. And so for when things don't go well, quote unquote, go well with as you're going through this with kids, a lot of times there might be something you can pull out of that to go like, hey, here's something to think about for next time. Maybe this will help it go better. And so not only does that again help them be competent eaters, it also helps them instill like, hey, when things go wrong, I wonder if there's something I can learn about this to maybe do it better next time. And those are invaluable things to learn
mhm.
as kids.
And guess what? Adults have that magic trick too of
Yeah.
checking in with themselves and saying, this didn't really work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel so good physically.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do differently next time? Or what decision, what
Mm-hmm.
trajectory led me here?
Yeah.
And that's something we often forget to do as adults in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like just checking in physically. How does that feel? And, um, with how we eat, I think that's an important lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And your examples are perfect for just talking about the child's division of responsibility. So we talked
Mm-hmm.
about the adults, what, when, and where. And then the child is how much they eat,
Right.
whether they decide to eat, and
Mm-hmm.
how they eat,
Mm-hmm.
the method. So the how much to eat, I think, can be simplified by just encouraging your child to listen to their hunger cues. We're all born with them. Anybody who's been around a baby knows that they will let you know when they're hungry, and they will
Mm-hmm.
let you know when they're done eating.
Yep. When
We're
they're done,
all
they are
born.
done.
Totally. You cannot force feed a baby. So with kids, they still have all of, adults still have those cues. We just have so many distractions that
Yeah.
are pulling us away from them.
Yeah.
And kids are unfortunately susceptible to similar distractions. Like you were saying with, Sophie, she wants to play a game, or she wants to go do this, or she has something else going on that she is kind of distracted from the mealtime, which is why it's so important to limit distractions, no TV, take toys and put them in their appropriate spot. It's time to sit at the table,
Mm-hmm.
with food in front of us and behave ourselves, however your family
Mm-hmm.
expects.
Yeah.
And then your child gets to choose how much they eat and whether
Mm-hmm.
they eat. Now, I think the challenge comes in with if your child just doesn't have an appetite at this particular mealtime or snack time. And depending on the age of the child, this can be navigated a number of ways. You can, I think it's okay to ask your child, like, well, what is your tummy saying? And, do you think you ate too much lunch, or did you, your snack was a little bigger than you expected? And that kind of thing. And then depending on the age of your child, you can also ask, well, what do you think might happen if you don't eat dinner right now? Do you think you might be hungry later? Um, or simply remind them that, okay, if you don't want to eat lunch, you don't have to, but we're not going to have snack time for a while. So you might
Mm-hmm.
get hungry, like kind of helping them learn about their appetite and the timing. Again, the eating schedule and routine doesn't have to be rigid. I mean, it's not like you have to eat at 12 noon on the
Right.
dot every day and there's no wiggle room. And given the day and given your life and what has been dished up today, you can totally, as the adult, you get to decide if you need to modify that, just as you would feeding yourself. Um, I think the important thing is to try and maintain the integrity of the routine.
Yeah.
That kids will generally get hungry every 2 to 3 hours. They'll generally start to feel an appetite coming up. So use that information to try and plan your day a little bit, and then follow those other steps. And then your
Yeah.
child will decide how much they need to eat at that time and whether or not they're hungry to eat.
Yeah. Yep. Completely agree. Anything
So,
else
um,
that you wanted to cover?
I, I think just the last thing I just have to drive home here is that every little human that we raise, and even when we were little humans, we learn behaviors and habits and beliefs about food
Mm-hmm.
that are so subtle, and they're implemented over such a long period of time and at such a slow rate that it's really important to, if you're listening to this as an adult and you're reflecting back on your childhood a little bit and starting to like realize some things, be graceful gracious, I should say, with
Yeah.
yourself, um, and with your parents, and understand that, parents, I truly believe that the vast majority of parents are really trying to do their best by their child. They are
Mm-hmm.
doing the best they can with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And eating and feeding does not have to be perfect. And there's no right way for each family. I mean, your family and your eating habits and your body is yours, and it's, different.
Mhm.
Um, but be curious about how some of these things, some of those pieces of your eating now as an adult, really think about how those may have built over time, and what
Right.
are some things you might be able to do to challenge some of those beliefs or habits, and why are those there. So if you tend to um, have very food centric celebrations in your family, for example, take a step back and think about how does it feel to, do you tend to overeat in those situations? Do you tend to mindlessly eat in those situations? Do you eat to please others because
Mhm.
your aunt made her special cake or whatever? So think about those things, and then really think about some of those belief systems that are still, are you identifying with, you've always been a big eater, and that's, you know, I mean, I have two older brothers. And so being a tiny thing with a big appetite was sort of a thing, an
Mhm.
identity piece for me. And so, yeah, just be curious, but be gracious with yourself, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. And I had a point and I lost it. I knew I was going to, because
No,
I
I
lost it like
prattled on
three
for,
times. No, I was like, oh wait, get it back. And I lost it again.
it'll come back. It
I
always
I don't
does.
remember what it was. Oh, I know what it was. There it
See?
is. So I think just piggybacking on exactly what you were saying is that as adults, when we go from like, I don't know why I struggle with this so much, to digging into that stuff, and we can say, oh, of course I struggle with that so much. Man, that's a powerful thing, because then you
Yeah.
have understanding um, for why your behaviors and patterns and routines exist. And when we don't know why they're there, they seem daunting. When we understand them, like, oh, because I was told this through my whole childhood, or whatever, then we go, okay, I know why they're there. I know what's like, how they were founded and formed and what props them up and that kind of stuff. And then you understand how to kind of dismantle them. And
Mhm.
so that kind of work, exactly what you were just describing, Erin, is, man, it really can bring about a lot of freedom as an adult.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not easy. It's not, parenting is not easy either. Like
No,
none of this is easy.
none of it's easy. Yeah, no, but
So
it's worth it.
start with one thing. You don't have to overhaul everything at once. Especially in the food world, it's
Hmm.
very complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. It's never ending, as we
Hmm.
pointed out at the beginning of the podcast. But at the same time, it's kind of cool because you always have another opportunity right around the corner to practice this new skill or this new behavior or this new
Hmm.
approach.
Yep.
So, look at it with some optimism in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, do you have a meaning in the mundane?
I do. And
You
it was
do.
one actually that Matt pointed out to me because so midway through our trip, we ended up finding this campground. The campground was full, but it was right near a reservoir, and they were allowing people to just set up their camper or something in the
Hmm.
parking lot. So we're like, okay, we'll camp in the parking lot overnight with this view of this beautiful reservoir. Um, and so we're sitting in the parking lot and we're kind of getting our dinner ready. And there's this other, group of RVs kind of down the parking lot a little ways. And there's these two older couples that are just having, Matt had like a little conversation with the guy walking through the parking lot earlier. And one of the guys was,
Hmm.
they made a comment about having a beverage. And Matt's like, guys, is that your beer cup? And the guy kind of looked at him and said, maybe. It's got rum in it. And so we were just kind of observing these two couples, and they were just having the best time in a parking lot,
Hmm.
in lawn chairs, by a highway. I
Hmm.
mean, sure, there's a beautiful reservoir and everything, but it just was so like simple.
Yeah.
And Matt just kept coming around, he'd come around the pickup and be like, man, that is there. Everybody should be so happy as those people over there. They're just having the time of their lives. They just looked so relaxed. You could just tell the vibe and the energy that they were just loving it.
Yeah.
And then we got to witness what appeared to be like a reunion with maybe a grandson kind of thing, like big hugs and tears, and then talking about vaccinations. And we just were, I mean, Matt was so touched by it. And I was like, everybody deserves to have that kind of like happiness and simplicity in their lives. And he's like, there's your meaning in the mundane. So there it is.
Nice. Good job, Matt.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Good job, Matt.
Yeah.
If he ever listens to this.
Better.
What's yours?
I like that. So I don't know how long this was. It was a few days ago, maybe 4 or 5 days ago. I had to get up early to train a neighbor. I had to be down at her house at like 5:50 in the morning. So I get up about 4:50. And when I know I'm going to be up early like that, I try to get in bed early so I'm not just zonked the next day, right? I'm bad about that, but I try. So I got in bed. I don't know. It was probably like 10:15 or something. It wasn't super early, but it was early for me. And my intent was, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed, right? Go to sleep. And Kathleen was in bed too. And we just started talking. And we just like, it was like an hour later, right? Like just nothing even important. And there are probably some important things in there, but just chit chatting, just like spending time together. And I was like, this is a cool thing that being married as long, as we have, that I can still kind of get like just caught up and lose track of time and just talking about nothing even important, just having a good time talking to her because I really like talking to her, and it was just one of those things where it's like, I wasn't even like, oh, I really need to get sleep. Oh, we should stop it. It's just like, oh boy, I really need to go to bed. Like I didn't realize how long it's been. Like I'm really sorry to stop this, and it was just, I don't know, just a good reminder that, not a good reminder, but just a really neat experience of just, it's easy when you've known someone in a marriage relationship for so long to lose kind of those things that you really liked about each other when you were dating and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was just fun to just kind of get caught up and lost in that.
Did you ever have those really long kind of all-nighter phone conversations?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. That you kind of lose track of time and you just kind of get lost in the conversation and you don't quite want to hang up because you're attached and enjoying this conversation.
You're both like falling asleep on the phone.
I know. Yes. And you're like, oh my gosh, I really need, but you're fighting it because you're like, I don't want this moment to end. That's a good reminder to try and recreate that in our hustle bustle, schedule driven lives, that we have. That when's the last time you just like sat up and lost track of time visiting?
Yeah. Well, and it's easy too, I think, as married couples, or especially as parents too, to when you talk, you're talking about like tasks and things that need to be done and, problem solving something in the family, as opposed to just like, just talk about nothing that's, like to do or really pertinent to let's just talk about whatever. It's easy to lose that. And it was just really fun to kind of recapture that for that evening.
Good.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Thanks, audience, for listening and tuning in. And we appreciate if you don't have children, I would really appreciate some feedback on some of these episodes that we've talked about with kids. If it has sort of reframed how you view your own eating and food beliefs.
Yep. And, feel free, share with us your mean and the mundanes if you have them. I think it'd be fun to share some of those that people send in on, different episodes. That'd be fun to do. So send those in, let us know, if you have any ideas for future topics, any thoughts on these episodes. We really, as always, we super appreciate you guys for listening and for supporting this message of Middleish and for helping share and spread it. We appreciate it a lot, so share, review, rate us. If you want to help support what we're doing, there's a link in the show notes for listener support. You can commit to $4.99 a month to help Middleish keep going and to help kind of spread the word. And we appreciate that as well.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.
Next
Have
time.
a good one.